ones that we can divide it up into little pieces.
Chag Sameach, everybody.
Chag Sameach.
Welcome back to those of you who were here. Some of you I've seen even more recently than others, some less so. All of you within the last month and a half, which is always a good thing, especially at the start of the year. To those of you joining us on whichever camera Dan is pointing at me right now, welcome. Remotely, I'm curious to see how you all plan on dancing with Torah scrolls that we're not bringing to your house or wherever you're watching from, but we're glad to have you with us anyway. This is kind of an interesting hybrid of things on a very uniquely American. You really want me to use the microphone, don't you?
I can't hear a thing.
Yeah, okay. Probably should have wired me for real, but I will go Monty Hall.
Remember for next year.
So for those of you, I apologize, who are joining us at home because you couldn't hear me until now. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you with us, even if I can't see you. I'm really curious to see how you're all going to dance around with the Torahs while we're doing that here. Because we're not planning on coming to your houses or wherever you're joining us, but we're glad to have you nonetheless. We're going to try and do a lot of things in the next couple hours. Some of them really don't go together, but all of them work, sort of. And we begin with acknowledging the clash of calendars. The Jewish calendar is just so unique and so miraculous when you really dig into it. If you felt at times this year that somebody had it in for us by where the holidays fall during the week, you should know that this is the least common layout of the Jewish holidays against the secular calendar. For Rosh Hashanah to start on Monday night, for Yom Kippur to be Wednesday night and Thursday, and then we turn around and come back the next night for Shabbat, to start both Sukkot and for us as Reform Jews, Simchat Torah on Monday night again. For the traditional world, Tuesday night, Wednesday for Simchat Torah at the end of 8 days of Sukkot. It doesn't fit our lifestyles well. We're constantly being jammed at the beginning of a week for Rosh Hashanah, at the end of the week for Yom Kippur. And we are here now. Sukkot is pretty much played out in our minds. And I'm grateful that Sukkot has had the chance to play out this year. Most years, Sukkot is the forgotten survivor of this time of year, because once upon a time we had families with young kids who would flock to come and dance with the Torahs on Simchat Torah. And I'm not sure why we're not reaching them, but we see who's here. And the last time I looked, none of us have young children yet or anymore. That's not a complaint. That's not a criticism of people who are not here. It's a reaction to reality. We moved this to 4 o'clock on Sunday deliberately, hoping we would be more attractive to people. We put the celebratory aspects up front, hoping we would be more attractive to more people. Well, we started Monday with 50 people in the sukkah. 50 people is the number we get for Passover, when there isn't Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur right before them to burn us out. We were thrilled Monday night. And people have been in and out of the sukkah all week, including people who are not members of our community, which is a story I'm going to share later. Fortunately, we were here to welcome them. So it's been a really neat Sukkot, but even though we're about to start day 7 at sundown, it feels like it's sort of played out. And today, doing Sukkot in the sukkah and in here because of the weather, with the kids, we were also doing Simchat Torah, because just the way the timing falls in the calendar, it would have been silly to do Simchat Torah with them next Sunday when the actual celebration was today, because we pushed it forward to get it to a Sunday when people might show up. So that's where all of this starts from. Well, that and the 400-pound elephant question in the room about what do you do about October 7th this year when it was Tuesday, the first day of Sukkot. Yeah, and we made the very logical decision to observe that yahrzeit on the Jewish calendar, not on the secular calendar, even though everybody refers to it as the attack of October 7th. If you recall 2 years ago where we were this weekend, Dan Nichols was just finishing his concert in this room, and we were trying to come to grips with what we were hearing from Israel. And that was about as schizophrenic as I can remember being too, because we were thrilled with Dan being here. It marked the end of the first time we had tried to make a big deal out of the entire season, and his being here meant a lot. And then October 7th happened, before we could even get Dan up on October 8th. And thank God he was here, because it was a distraction, and it allowed us to celebrate a little bit more before we had to deal with the reality that we've been dealing with for the last 2 years. But I can't help but think back to the fact that we're doing this now, and it's sort of really the 2-year anniversary. It truly is, at least on the Hebrew calendar. And then to have the events of the world lead us to be sitting here in this limbo at this moment as it deals with Israel, as we're going to say Yizkor for Israelis who died 2 years ago, hoping and praying that what we're being told is going to come to pass in the next 24 to 48 hours, and we're going to see hostages finally coming home. We're going to see the war ending, at least for the moment. Is it a peace? Is it a ceasefire? Will it hold? We don't know. And we have to mark the day anyway. And how do we do that? So what I want to do is in 3 parts. I want to do a little bit of learning about our particular Torah scrolls and looking at our particular Torah scrolls and having a sense of ownership of them so that we appreciate what we've got. And I'm grateful to have grandparents of this coming week's bat mitzvah here, because it's the same scroll we're going to be using on Saturday. It's the scroll we're going to be using this year, I suspect, for most of our B'nai Mitzvah, because it's the one I rolled back to Genesis, so it's the one that's going to keep moving forward. Yeah. People ask, you have 3 scrolls, why? Well, because we had 4. We only had room in the ark for 3. At one point, we had 5. Because we were also hosting the Wan family scroll. The 4th scroll is out on permanent loan to a congregation in southern Maryland who needed 1 to be able to read, and we had 4. So we lent them 1 because, as we'll talk about, one of the scrolls we were given on permanent loan when we began, our very first scroll, the little one, came from Washington Hebrew under the same circumstances. It was one that didn't fit their space anymore. It's the tiny one. If you've ever been in the sanctuary at Washington Hebrew, you have to be outsized to fit in the sanctuary and work. It's not the place you go for a little one. So it was old and it was retired, and it served us well. And then Dan Sherry arranged for us to receive a Holocaust scroll that we know a lot more about than the last time I did this program, so we can talk about that and look at it a little bit more. And the 3rd scroll was the one that we had written for ourselves, that has only been owned by us, is only a couple of years old, and is still in magnificent, pristine shape because it's not old by comparison. So we'll look at that. And then once we've done that, we'll celebrate and sing and dance and carry on and be what may be the smallest and slowest hakafot for Simchat Torah, but we will give everybody a chance to hold a Torah, because we can. And I've got enough music to get us at least around the room the 7 times that make it officially Simchat Torah. And then we'll read the end of Deuteronomy, because it's what's expected of us, and we'll immediately begin. And thank goodness she's reading from chapter 3, so I can read from chapter 1, and we'll be in order. And then after that, we'll go into Yizkor, which is going to be this bizarre mix of both traditional Yizkor for our own, just like we did recently on Yom Kippur, but with additional materials to acknowledge those we remember who died 2 years ago in Israel and since, all over the region and all over the world. So that's the game plan. So what I'm going to ask you to do is come on up. I have conveniently set up 2 rows of chairs next to each other in the incredibly ambitious hope that 16 bodies would show up to fill them. I think it doesn't matter. If you don't want your faces on the screen, sit with your back to the cameras on this side. If you do want your face on camera, sit on this side. I'm not sure we need people facing each other for this to work, because I think we can open it up on one side on laps. And if we can't, we'll push the chairs forward and make sure they don't fall forward.
Right.
So the one thing I'll say before I go up and start bringing out the Torah scrolls one at a time, I said this with the kids today, it's fascinating. This 22-day explosion of Jewish experience that starts with Rosh Hashanah and ends with Simchat Torah. We run the full panoply of emotions. We start in the joy of a new year. We go to the challenge of atoning on Yom Kippur and the Yizkor that goes with that. We celebrate on Sukkot as a community, but we make ourselves vulnerable in doing so by going out of our homes and into the wilds of the world and making ourselves feel a little bit vulnerable. And then we come back in and we grab hold of the tree of life that we call Torah, and we finish reading it for the year and immediately start over. So it's this roller coaster of emotions going through it, but it begins and ends exactly the same way, with the end and beginning of a new cycle of something. Rosh Hashanah, the year; Simchat Torah, the year of reading. And so if it feels like it's not really the new year Jewishly until we get through all of the holidays, then you're probably a rabbi. Because that's how it always feels to me, or related to one. Because it's this limbo period that we talk about at Havdalah, where it's no longer Shabbat, but it's not yet the new week. Only this limbo lasts for about 3 weeks, or in this case, closer to 4, because it's not going to feel like the year is completely started until after the bat mitzvah for many of us. Because that week of it's normal isn't normal yet. It's all the preparations, it's everybody coming in, it's celebrating and getting past it. So if you're feeling a little bit discombobulated right now, that's not the worst thing between the emotional roller coaster and the start and stop of where does the year really begin. We're not there. We're not here. Okay, we're not here. You're here, which is my cue to go up here for a minute. So we have 3 scrolls. And the first one I'm going to bring out is the one that has been exclusively ours. And if at home you're wondering what you just missed, you missed nothing. I wasn't talking. Because I wouldn't have been able to hold the microphone close enough to my mouth anyway. So I meant to look back in the archives. Does anybody remember exactly what year we had this scroll written?
I was just thinking, I would say around 15.
I believe 15 years ago was right. Someplace around 2010. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to try and spread them out on this side, and then you guys can pull up and see. But let's see what happens. Gently keep rolling out, and Carol, if you would keep a hand on this and make sure it stays here. I'm going to sneak behind it, you go on the other side. And Dan, I wish you could see this from above somehow.
A drone.
Drone! I may have to when we're finished.
Yeah.
Carol, push it all the way forward if you can. Is it all the way in? Yeah. Oh, good grief. Then the other alternative is, let's try to, everybody get some hands under it.
Move the center chairs out.
And bring the chairs forward with you. Little more, and then if you sit down, pull right, and if you pull the chair next to you, Carol, forward, so you don't have to rest your arm. No, the chair next to you on your side. No, on your side, where you're sitting. Yeah. So what we see here is a fairly new scroll, and depending on the angle that the light is hitting it and you're sitting at, you may be seeing glare coming off some of the letters. That's how new this is. If you were to actually get down to the level where you're looking across the level of the cloth of the skin itself, you would see the ink is still raised above the level of the skin. Because in 15 years, we have not used it so much and rolled it so much and run a yacht over it so much that it has worn down to the level of the cloth and completely worn in, which is a really fascinating thing to be able to say about a Torah scroll. You don't see them that new anymore. You really, except in the case where you're writing from scratch a new scroll for yourselves, that you would see this. We are in the book of Deuteronomy. I know that because there's virtually nothing left at Carol's end, and an awful lot over here on this end. And if we look through, so the first thing I want you to look at is we've got a couple of different pages open. Looks like we've got 4 pages open, and I can tell the seams because I know what I'm looking at. And this particular scroll, when it was done first, was done with really exquisite artisanship. So obviously, you don't get animals with skins long enough that you write them on one skin. You have to combine them together. They're tied together. They're tied together with gut. You can't see the ties here because of the way they're tied, and then the pages are folded over. You can see the fold, but the actual place where the gut comes through on this side is hidden under the fold. Which is a level of, yeah, if you've got the seam exposed there, you can see it from the back more clearly. There's also a little bit of tape used top and bottom just to make sure. And in fact, you can get, it looks like a Band-Aid, you can see it through with the light, especially in the middle over by Pesh and Bob. You can see the one at the top coming through really clearly there. So in theory, we've got at least one more column. We've got at least 2 more columns not exposed on that end, and that's fine. And I know it's at least 2 more columns on that end because the next to last column is a doubled column. It's part of...
This one is a fancy Band-Aid. There's a pattern on it.
Yeah, it is a fancy Band-Aid. So the last portion of Torah, V'zot HaBracha, is only read on Simchat Torah. The last 2 chapters, 33 and 34. I know this because we just finished reading 33 and 34 in Torah study. And I was reminded of that fact when I worked with the 6th graders for Friday night, working on the Devar Torah. And the teacher assumed that since we had read Ha'azinu the week before, which was chapter 32, that the Torah reading for last Friday night had to have been 33 and 34. Except it wasn't, because last Friday night was Sukkot. So it was the special portion for Sukkot all the way back in Exodus, but she had them read that anyway. And I was fine with that because I knew we were going to talk about it today, and I wanted the kids to know what goes on there. But chapter 32 in Ha'azinu is the poem that Moses writes at God's desire, telling future generations of Jews how we were going to mess up after we entered the land. I know that it's not showing because it's written in half a column. So if you were actually to roll it out, probably 1 more column on that end, maybe 2, if you dare, you probably will be able to show us the doubled column. I'm hoping. Okay, it may take 1 more. Sorry about that. No, we got way too much on that end still. I don't know how.
We're not going to make it.
We're not going to make it. It was worth a shot. We've got a lot more on that end than I thought we did, so I'm actually going to recalibrate my thought about what we might be looking at. This is what happens when you don't check where exactly in Deuteronomy it's rolled to. Let's see. Oh my goodness, we are really early. At the bottom of this column right here, V'haya im shamoa tishma bekol Adonai Elohecha is the third paragraph of V'ahavta. The one that we don't read a lot of because it talks about tzitzit. If I go farther, okay, right in front of David, now I know exactly where we are, good. Where the new paragraph begins, you can tell after the large white spot there, Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem, which is where we should have been. And I should have let it roll out this way, and then we would have seen the last 5 chapters. So nitzavim is what we just read again on Yom Kippur morning. It's what we read on the Shabbat before the new year began. All of you are standing this day before Adonai, your God. The words that we questioned every year, the words that Dan Nichols so eloquently played us on, because when we read Atem nitzavim and Moses is saying all of you are standing here, what we hear is all of us are standing here. We don't hear all of you. We don't think all of you. But this year, as I announced my retirement, suddenly I was in Moses' position, lahavdil, and I'm sitting there going, I use us an awful lot. I've made it one of my pronouns because of how much I use it and how much we build community, and I try to build community with my language. And here I am reading Atem nitzavim and announcing my retirement and saying, you are going into the promised land, which is exactly what he's getting them ready to hear when he says, Atem nitzavim, all of you are standing here today because I've been talking to you because you're going into the land and I'm not. So it is us, but it's us expressed as you, and it's an interesting portion. It's a powerful portion. But everything you see in front of you from nitzavim back, and let's see if I can figure out how far back we went. Ki teitzei lemilchama. So we're looking at ki teitzei, when you go out to war, which is the end of Shoftim, then it's the next portion, ki teitzei, then it's ki tavo, because you got to go out before you can come back in. Then it is nitzavim. So we've got 4 portions open here to give you an idea of what you're looking at. There's still 2 more weekly portions beyond what we're seeing on that end, Vayelech and Ha'azinu. This probably, and I could get you a real mark for this, that we're about chapter 17 here. So literally you're looking at less than half of the book of Deuteronomy, which at 34 chapters is the second shortest of the 5. So you got to imagine at least 10 times more material than what we have opened up in front of us on this scroll. If you look closely, you can see the etchings on the skin for the lines, both horizontal and vertical. They're still very clearly there. They extend into the margins so you can see them. This is how the sofer knows how to keep a straight line and where to stop. They're good, but they do need guidance. And this is how they get it. It's actually etched right onto the cloth, onto the skin. The other thing,
Is that the sofer's job, or is that something?
I believe somebody prepares the skin that way for these days. It's certainly one of the skills they're taught. So if they get a plain piece of skin, they could conceivably make sure it's prepared right and etch it themselves. But usually, if I remember correctly what we heard years ago, they get it already etched. And it's etched with a certain number of lines. So there are, I want to say 256 columns in your classic form Torah scroll. I may be off by a couple either way. Of those 256, that's covering the 5 books completely, 6 of them, if you look at the very first word of the column, wherever you are sitting, I will bet you $1 to donuts that every column you're looking at, with the possible exception of one, with the number of columns we have out, first letter of every column is a Vav. Vav, 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 Vav. Because out of 256, only 6 of the columns, and one of them is Bereshit back in Genesis that we'll see when we open to the other side, doesn't start with a Vav. That's the classical scribal form. They call it a Vav scroll because of that. And it doesn't exactly force exactly the same words onto every column of every scroll, because there's so many words in the text that start with a Vav, but it limits how you can end a scroll and a column, because you got to make sure the next word begins with a Vav, because those 6 words that don't are consistent throughout all the Vav scrolls. And I have always meant to go and learn them and be able to show you exactly where they are. Maybe I'll do that in retirement, I don't know. But that's one of the things that marks a classic scroll. The other is the fact that the scribal arts are a guild tradition. You learn from a mentor as an apprentice. So you learn the font, you learn the techniques, you learn the foibles of the person who teaches you. Much as the cantorial arts for singing, you are dependent for the nuances in the melody on the person who teaches you, which is why if you put together enough Jews, they can't sing the Hafta together. Because we've all been taught the same chant by different people. And all of those little things go crashing into each other when you put enough people together. So
I love the flourishes.
the flourishes on this one are pretty standard.
But they're very, well,
But they're
because
very
it's
clear
your
because
scroll,
it's new,
your
exactly.
scroll, yeah. Especially on like the shin and sin.
Right. So some of that is designed to make this more attractive, more beautiful to look at, which is the Talmudic concept of hidur mitzvah, of beautifying the fulfillment of a commandment. And that's what Sofrim do. They don't just write, they write with beautiful handwriting and calligraphy and font. And surprise, if you've got Hebrew characters on your word processor, there's actually multiple Hebrew fonts. The traditional one that you're looking at is called Stam. It's a handwritten font, obviously, because for years it was handwritten and still is. It's pretty straightforward. Most of the time, the letters are pretty straight up and down. You're going to find, if you look carefully, there are places where some of the letters are extended like that resh. You're going to find places where letters are jammed together, particularly close to a margin, when the sofer realizes he's getting into trouble, when he looks ahead to see what's coming next and where he is on the line. You tend to get squeezing and extending more in 2 places. One around the particular portions that already have a unique form to them, things like the Michamocha, the Song at the Sea, things like the commandments, things like the priestly blessing, which is written very exactly on the lines, so that the white space and the black space create a message as well. The one in front of you, Pesh, that looks like it's got more white than the others, you'll notice it looks like steps. That's that's part of the scribal art, how to use the white space there. It's deliberate. It's marking off a text, and I am pretty sure that the first word after all of those white spaces is arur, if I remember that one correctly. Yeah, it's
Before the space is the same as well.
yeah. So what you got there is a listing of curses. Arur, curse it is. And they're laid out on the line deliberately so that you're descending with each one. Because that's what happens if you get cursed too often. Your life starts to go downhill in a spiral, like it's falling downstairs. So subtle little things like that the Sophronic arts allow the text to tell us. Certain letters, traditionally done bigger for emphasis, smaller for emphasis, and around all of those things, tradition has built up reasons for why that may or may not have anything to do with why they were originally done that way. The most famous example of that being the ayin and the daled in Shema. The ayin at the end of Shema and the daled at the end of Vayed. Echad, rather, right. We don't know why, originally. We just know that they were. And somebody looking at them long enough said, okay, so Shema here with an ayin sounds an awful lot like Shema with an aleph, which means perhaps. And you really don't want anybody thinking that they might be saying, perhaps Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. It sort of undermines the meaning of the sentence. Likewise, God is one, echad. You might think the daled was a resh and read it as Adonai acher. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is your God, Adonai other. Is very different from Adonai is one. Yeah, Adonai is one is saying there aren't others. Adonai is an other, says there are others. Not that there aren't places in this text that don't tell us there are other gods, like Michamocha. Michamocha ba'elim Adonai, who is like you among the gods. Oops. Given where they were, understandable at the time. But the idea of emphasizing the daled and the ayin to avoid making those reading and comprehension mistakes kind of makes sense if you think about it. And then another generation or two later, somebody looked and said, oh yeah, the large ayin and the large daled, they spell the word aid, which is witness, which is what we're doing when we say these words. And now you've got a whole story behind it, and some of it may even have been true. But it's added to the meaning and the significance of the words because of the way the words are written and the letters are written. And that's scribal artistry.
Question.
Yeah.
If the scribe is, can he erase a letter that he's writing and if it's not?
Yes. As long as he's still working on the page separately. And I have to say it this way now, he or she, we finally have female sofrim, which would be sofrot. Technically, if you want to correct my Hebrew grammar too. Finally, we have them, so we have to account for them. Yes, you're allowed to make mistakes as long as you catch them and correct them, and as long as you do so before they become part of the scroll by being attached in.
So they work on one panel.
So you work on one panel at a time, and you double and triple check the panel before you attach it.
That was the practice scroll.
Michael Pollock found a mistake in one of our scrolls.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly where it is. It's still there.
Well, yeah.
Well, we actually will not get to, we might get to see it this morning, actually. I'll look for it when we open it. We may be able to see it. It's not actually a mistake, as it turns out. So, you know, there's a lot that the scroll can tell us, just in normal, and this, it's a very plain scroll, which is part of its beauty. There's nothing overtly fancy about it. It's so traditional looking that if one were to be a cynic and not have a sense of what we're capable of in terms of photocopying, it lines up so perfectly with the columns of your standard tikkun, which is the book that we use to teach the kids how to prepare for their b'nai mitzvah, that you might question whether it was actually written by a sofer. That's how spot on exact it is, and how fitting to the font and the styles and everything else. There's nothing to distinguish it from something that might have potentially been photocopied, except how would you do it?
Plus the ink is raised.
And the ink is, but again, the ink is raised. If you've ever watched your typical inkjet printer, ink comes out above the paper. It gets shot onto the paper by the printer. I'm not suggesting it is. I'm just saying that it's that exactly spot on. And there's something to be said for that. So I'm going to take this one and put it to the side, putting down the microphone for a second, folks at home, so that I can actually, Laura, if I can ask you to come around this side and take this from me like I'm holding it
On the
on the,
side.
on the top and bottom.
Got it.
It's going to be heavy.
I know that.
Got it?
Yes. I just had to get a better position instead of reaching around you.
What I would like to do is roll it towards you, because that would be so much easier, except that in order to read it in a couple of minutes where we need it, I actually have to go the other way. So while you guys are rolling towards me,
Okay, I'm gonna roll towards you. Can I put it down on the chair to do it?
yeah, you can do that. Here is what I was talking about before with the doubled column
Oh, yeah.
of
Yeah,
chapter
there it is.
32 of the poem, and then the prose at the end of it.
Okay.
And then here's chapter 33 and 34, which is what we're actually going to be reading. And that's where it ends.
Just wanna make sure we don't make it
Will they
crooked.
be changing their clothes and out of white before next week?
No,
All right, you got it?
okay. I'm treating next week like one of the holidays. The beauty part is where normally I would ask you to be careful to roll it fairly tightly. I'm going to only ask you to be careful to roll it straight.
That's what we're trying to do.
Because we are close enough to the end that it's not going to matter anyway, and it's already so well rolled on that end that it's going to make it inside anyway.
Yeah, I was trying to, that was my concern, was that we weren't making it crooked.
Here we go. Keep it coming to me, keep it coming to me, let's lock them, and I got them. Thank you, well done. And just so you are aware, I am not redressing this one yet.
Do you wanna tie it or no?
I'm gonna tie it over here, because this is the one we're reading first, now that it's rolled to where we're reading it. Dun, dun, dun. And somebody remind me when we're finished reading it to remember to roll it away from the last column. Because that way it doesn't get too tight on the end. And you'll see why that matters in a second when I open the one that's rolled back to gray sheet and it doesn't want to stay open at all. So that's number one. Number two. My favorite one to show off because I can carry it around one-handed. And there goes the yacht. What did I do with the yacht? I put it there, good. Reason I can't use that yacht for this one too. You'll notice also rolled all the way to the end of Deuteronomy. Rolled really tight and really tiny. That's why we don't use it very much anymore. I don't like making other people read from it, and I certainly don't want to read from it anymore. And it looks like I'm being really dangerously loose with this. Don't try this at home. So, just to give you an example of different scribal arts, this is the Aurora section that we were talking about before, that in the other one looked like steps and was all on one column. Here they look much more like blocks, and they're split over two columns. So if you would roll that actually towards me, even more. And then turn around and pass it down. Because now I think we're probably close to where we ended on that end, and we should get the rest of Deuteronomy. And this one should be small enough to go on the seats. Uh-huh.
I once read from this scroll.
I've read from it many times.
Pain in the neck.
No, thank you.
It's also got spots that are rubbed.
Yeah.
How old is this one, do we know?
We do not, we know it's old enough that it was retired by
By Washington.
Washington Hebrew. We know it's been cleaned up a couple of times.
But like, see this mush over
Right.
here?
Okay, I'm not gonna say what I would normally say because I'm a lame duck and I can say what I wanna say. That looks like water drops to me.
It looks like the.
And it shouldn't look like water drops to me. I'm not thrilled with how I'm seeing it.
It looks like the anchoring. Yeah. Well, actually, this one didn't run. It's just gray in the background unless somebody rewrote over
No,
it.
we've got some over here that are like a little fuzzy that look like the ink
Yeah.
started to smear.
So,
And it does look like a rip.
I'm picking up the microphone, I promise. I hope you got some of that at least. Good. So, this is a much smaller scroll. If you look at the size of the writing is actually a little bit bigger than the writing you would find in your typical mezuzah scroll or your typical scroll inside of a set of tefillin. Even though it's really old, yeah, you can still see the etching lines because they really don't go away. And even though there's a couple of these spots that I think may have been man-made, a lot of them probably are color impurities that came with the scroll. Because remember, the cloth is made from the skin of a kosher animal. And not all kosher animals have perfectly white skin. That's probably from use. Not nearly as worried about that discoloration at the top of the column because it's the top of the column where there are no letters. The reason we use the yod and the reason we worry about discoloration is because the oil on your fingers erodes the ink. So over time, if we were allowed to touch it without thinking about it, we would be constantly having to repair scrolls because the letters would wear out even more than they do. You're looking at that really long resh in the middle of the...
Really long ration, Shema Yisrael.
Yeah, there is.
Rub it. There's this, it looks like a rubbing, like
It's
somebody
scratched out.
rubs it with their finger. Your comment about not touching it with your fingers. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah,
Looks like somebody rubbed it, like
it
literally
sure
rubbed
does.
it. All right, I'm moving because I'm about to sneeze.
Yeah, don't sneeze on it, that would not be good. So,
Thought I was.
watermelon. So if we actually open this just a little bit further. And again, this one's smaller, so a little bit further, maybe a lot further.
Do you want us to move this side down? so
No.
we can hear more?
I'm only gonna do it for a second. Those are the 10 Commandments,
The
the lows.
low, yeah, okay.
That's one of those formatted sections. Which means that's chapter 5. So chapter 1 of Deuteronomy, oh, here it is. I can tell where it is because there's this big white space there. And that's how you can tell the end of a book and the beginning of a book. And I wanted to open it to that because we're going to need that in a minute when we get to the third scroll. The biggest piece of the first part of Deuteronomy, in 2 parts. In one column, you got the 10, well, actually in 2 columns, you got the 10 Commandments. And in the next column, you've got the Shema and the V'ahavta. Because when we say, set these words which I command you this day upon your heart, which we take completely out of context in the V'ahavta when we pray it, and you think these words are the words of the Shema, maybe the V'ahavta itself in the context of the liturgy. Here it's clear the words are the words of the commandments, represented by the 10, but extending to all of them. Yeah, I need to look at that.
Ran out of space over here. It got real tiny and a letter that went over the margin.
The older you get, the more you will find things like that, because the more times things have been repaired, and frequently the running over the margin is the work of the repairing software and not the original software.
The scroll underneath of it is clearly, it's whiter than the rest. It's
Yeah.
clearly patched.
Patched, exactly.
Whoever repaired it did not have the same handwriting.
Yep.
To be able to match the spacing.
Not unusual.
And this is really pale.
Coming your way. This is part of why I do this on a regular basis. This is how I check our Torah scrolls. You find things for me, and I take credit for them. It's called being a rabbi.
How pale that is.
Yeah. So that definitely looks like some letters have faded out, which is not surprising. What is that first word there? That looks like it's low. So what looks, okay, so here's what happened here, and then I'm going to come back to the Shema and see if it's the same thing over here. That first faded out word is low. So it looks like what this software did fixing this, because you'll notice the ink around it is darker than the rest, is it looks like he corrected it in the classic editorial style by writing it backwards
Oh, writing the last letter first.
while he was correcting and working from left to right, even though he was writing Hebrew. And he actually misjudged the spacing and ran out of words before he could get all the way back to what he had rubbed out, which is why you can see some of the rubbing out. So now I got to go back and look at the one over the really long R in Yisrael and see what's going on over there. What's the word after, what does it look like the word after low is
The scratch, the faded, or the?
in the rewrite? It would be the first word on the next line.
Yud, Kaf, Vav, final summon.
Yeah, that's, if you look at what's
Yeah.
left showing, it looks like the same letters.
You kind of see the colors.
Yeah, so over here, oh, I don't even want to know what that might have been. What's above that resh?
What is that? I don't know, it's hard to tell.
Because what,
Looks like it was scratched out with like an X-Acto knife or something.
unless what has happened, and that's how you would get rid of it. That's how you would scratch it out, is you, again, because it's,
A razor blade.
remember what we saw in the first one, there's a reason we're doing them in the order we are. If the ink is sitting on top, to erase it, you scrape it off with an X-Acto knife. And what you're left with is what has sunk into the cloth over the years, which on ours being brand new is virtually nothing, but on this one being probably 200 years old, at least from the looks of it, you've got more that's sunk in. I am definitely going to look at this one more carefully when we're done. So when we roll it, we're going to roll this way and leave it for me to look at. But you can, again, you can see on this one, the seams are much more exposed and visible. You can see the gut because it's not folded over. If you were to look on the back, you will probably see that a fair amount of the mastic, the Band-Aids, are either loose or missing, having fallen off over time. And you get an idea of just how well tied and how tightly tied they are to account for that as well.
Also like wear marks.
Well, yeah. And some of those are wear on the skin itself, and some are things that are developed. Depending on how many times it's been repaired, some of them may be patch marks that have had the chance to blend in and look like they were originally part of it. Yeah, but imagine having to read this every week. This is a challenge. This was, for the first 3 years of this congregation's existence, our scroll, singular. Unless Big Lefty, which is the one down in southern Maryland, which we've never fully gotten the story of when and how and why it got here. It's the only one we don't know the provenance of completely. But I can't believe it was here before 1967. I have to assume it came with a new member who joined sometime after 1967, possibly sometime, probably before 73, because that would explain why when we built this building, we built an ark for 3 scrolls. You don't build an ark for 3 scrolls if you only have 2. So I'm going to put that other one as getting to us someplace between 67 and 73, but I have no idea who was responsible for getting it here, where it might have come from, or any of that.
And who's around that would know?
Yeah.
Rita.
And probably not.
And we know that when we went through the Temple topics, there was no.
Right. And when we were having our own scroll done and we were doing the forensics on the others to know what we had, so we knew what we wanted to do. And there was nothing on that one at all, which is one of many mysteries of that one. There's a reason I call it Big Lefty.
I thought it was called Big Lefty because it was left, somebody.
It was written by a left-handed sofer, which I had been taught was a no-no.
Mark,
You want somebody sinister writing a Torah?
also, wouldn't you,
I would.
I would too. It
So
actually,
Danielle next week.
I would too, because honestly, it makes a heck of a lot of sense because a lefty doesn't drag over the wet ink.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like a righty writing in English. And the lefties, if you remember back in the day,
It was big.
would always smear because their hand would, a lefty would be leading the quill.
Unless they write like this.
Would be, right. So I don't know why except for the fact of the meaning of the word sinister.
and all the people, what is the word I'm looking for?
The superstition and
Superstitions
Michigan,
about left-handed.
the Baba Mises and Michigas in Yiddish?
And Michigan. When we had the new one made,
Yeah.
did that same sofer do repairs on the others while he was here?
Mm-hmm. Yes, he did. And I believe that's the last time we had anything done. So,
We also don't open our scrolls every single week.
no, we don't, which is not something I'm terribly proud of, but it
It's
saves a lot of
fact.
wear. So, I'm gonna ask you to hold this, and I'm gonna go over there, and we're gonna roll it this way,
Okay.
because eventually I'm
I
gonna
do want to look at that.
I want to look at that one again when we're done, and eventually, I want this one to end up in the middle for the year, because there's going to be a time when I'm going to need it, and it'll be good to have it there. Because the other two will be rolled front and back, like they usually are. And the only reason this one was at Nitzavim is because last year we were doing the extra scroll in the back for those who were sitting in the chapel, and we were doing gather around and read along on this scroll. Kind of ironically.
Yes, really.
Everyone can read this.
Because everybody jammed around so close that they could see,
They can see there was writing.
maybe. There's a rumor that there was writing.
And it's
Meet me in the middle.
right.
And your side goes up.
My side goes.
My side goes under your side. That's another quaint little tradition. Genesis always goes above Deuteronomy when you roll. So the right hand eighths is always top.
I'm making another bow.
Either. Bow is probably better.
I'll be right back.
And last but not least, roll to the beginning, because it needs to be. The first thing you will notice as I start to roll it out, Bob, if you would grab and start rolling it, is that the columns are much longer. The page is significantly bigger on this one, if you will. So this one, I'm going to suggest that while it's rolling out, everybody take a scooch step in with your seat, and let's let the bottom part of it rest on our laps. just looks different, doesn't it?
There's not a vault in every column.
That's, for starters, yeah.
This little one didn't have a vav in every column either.
Didn't?
The section, no, the section we were looking at, I saw multiple that didn't have a
Ooh,
vav.
I gotta go back and look.
If it's bigger, then the bugs wouldn't be at the
Right.
top.
Right.
They're buried in the middle.
Is the 3-line break verses or is that?
So, that is not the end of the book.
No, I was looking at how much we had out and I don't think that's the end of the book.
Correct. Since this is the beginning of the
So
book.
this is the beginning, yes.
Or if you could slide down one seat, so you can grab the end here.
Oh, sure.
So, we've already got that full line break that is not in a book.
Mhm.
We've noticed that the vowels are not predominant. We've noticed that the columns are much longer. And honestly, the font is different. Subtly, but it is. So,
Yeah, it's not the triangle. It's-
right, so I'm looking over, I don't think if I remember the content of this scroll well enough, I don't think there are any examples of the phenomenon I'm about to describe. So, here's what we know. This is our Holocaust scroll.
Is this like police spot? You know,
I'm actually going to do this from over here on this one. This is our Holocaust scroll. The Nazis, in their infinite wisdom and organizational talent, when they thought there was a chance and a good possibility that they would actually win the silly war, and that they might succeed in wiping out the Jews from the face of the earth, they thought ahead to what the world would look like without Jews. And they were excited at the thought, because unfortunately that's how they thought. But they also recognized that eventually there would come a time when there would be a generation that wouldn't fully appreciate the gift that had been bequeathed to them by Hitler's generation wiping us all out, because they would never have experienced a world with us in it and our influence. So they decided that to make sure their legacy was secure, they would, at the end of the war, create a museum to the despised Jews so future generations could fully appreciate. So starting early on, because this scroll comes from Czechoslovakia, which is although it's southwest Czechoslovakia, so it may not have been in the very first wave. You know, it may have been more in the Hungarian wave, which was later. And we know that Hungary was a source for a lot of what survived, because by then they were certainly cataloging and saving stuff for a museum. But we know that this comes from the Moravian region of what is today Czechia, the Czech Republic, from a town called Podavin. And we know that it was written sometime right before 1850 because of the records that the Germans left and that what survived of the community of Podavin allowed to be found out. And the reason we know this is because at the end of the war, when the Allies came through and found the warehouses and the meticulous records, what do we do with it? There are no Jews left in Podavin. There are no Jews left in the Warsaw Ghetto to return these things to where they came from. Up stepped the congregation at Westminster in London and recognized what the significance of this was and what could be done with it, and made a deal with the Allies that for a reduced fee, they would buy all the scrolls, have them repaired at their own expense, with the intent not of putting them in museums to tell the story where they would never be used, which is not good for a Torah scroll. They're like people, you have to work out if you want to stay in shape. They would get them into the hands of congregations that would appreciate them and use them and keep the legacy and the memory of the original communities alive with their own. When I was in Fredericksburg, we had a scroll there from,
You were going to ask, I'm just trying to think where it was.
I'm blanking.
There's also the Czech Republic, though, no? Colleen.
Kalin
Yes.
in Czechoslovakia.
It was, yeah.
But Kalin was not cleared out until 1942, when their scroll was taken, because a whole lot of material was taken with it, including lists of who was sent out. So when I was in Fredericksburg and we learned about the history of the Jews of Colleen, we actually made it part of our ritual that in reading birthdays every week for our congregation, we also read birthdays off the lists of the victims in Colleen because we knew when they were born. And we decided that remembering them on their day of birth was way better than assuming when they died in terms of keeping their memory alive.
Any idea of how many scrolls were involved?
Couple of thousand. It's something like 1,700, I think. It's at least 1,441 because that's what ours is numbered. And I know that because I'm looking at, we finally have, thanks to the Hausners, thanks to Tony Hausner, a certificate from Westminster, which is what I'm reading off of to remind me that it's Potovin and it was written in 1850. But we also know that this is not a classically written scroll. And my guess is that this is the scroll in which an error was purported to have been found, and it's going to... So just to give you an idea, 256 columns in the other scroll, which is about one scroll per book. It's actually a little bit more columns than books, because...
You mean chapters?
Chapters. Because Genesis has 50 chapters, and that's the most. So we don't have 250 chapters combined. So on that scroll, you're getting less than a chapter per column. Your granddaughter on Sunday is reading the last line of chapter 2 and the beginning of chapter 3, and she's starting at the bottom of the first column. We know, we practiced it the other day. So you're looking at significantly more material here. They're not only longer, but many of them are far wider. And then occasionally you get one that looks normal width, which is just weird. It doesn't seem to fit a uniform size, which is kind of interesting.
I think it was written by more than one person.
Well, over time it might have been. I was told by one sofer that this was in fact never intended to be used in the sanctuary. I learned from a second sofer that that was a rather limited viewpoint. Because from the second sofer I learned that there was among the other schools of the scribal art, there were several schools in the Kabbalistic community, which we know existed in southwest Czechoslovakia, in part, where they deliberately didn't follow the classic forms because they thought the more outlandish they could be, the more their scrolls would stand out, and that would bring them more attention and more acclaim and more holiness as a result. Further on, it's definitely in the book of Leviticus because I've seen it in the scroll. This particular sofer had this fetish for I picked the word deliberately, for the letter Fe, which when it's written in block form, if you visualize it in your mind, it's a spiral. There are places in Leviticus in this text where it's a continuing spiral, meant to be understood, I think, as an eternal spiral inward. So inside the spiral of the Fe, there's another Fe as the spiral continues. I don't believe there are any visible right now. None of them jumped off the page at me, and when you know what you're looking for, they're pretty obvious to the eye. But I'm reading upside down. Vayhi, what do you got? Oh, that was just the
That was
yeah,
the
squeaking. I am looking.
I saw somewhere you saw Pat, I'm not sure if there's a Faye in there.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of Faye, but I'm not seeing.
A lot of phase, but I'm not seeing anybody getting
Not
fancy.
curly cues, I don't see
Right.
fancy curly cues.
Like I said, you'd know it the minute you saw it. Vayomer Elohim El Noach. So we're still in Noah over here. So much fun
Yeah.
reading Torah
I'm
upside
looking
down.
over here, I don't see any curly cue faces.
Vayehi Ra'av Ba'aretz.
Yeah, I don't see.
Vayomer Adonai El Avram. Lech lecha me'artzecha Umimoladetecha, this one has been fixed. And if you look really carefully at Avram here, this is probably where Michael found what he found. Because when I came in, there was nothing connecting the top and the bottom on the final mem of Avram. And if you look really carefully, even fixed up, the resh stops short of reaching the bottom of the line. And this did not read as Avram the first time I had it open at all.
Carol said he has an October.
He has an October birthday.
That
so
would work.
Makes sense.
That would make perfect sense.
It also looks like it was fixed, because you could see the ink is darker.
Yeah, there were a lot of places where this one was fixed. This one I know was fixed because, right. This one I knew was fixed because this one I had particularly shown to the sofer and said, that looks wrong to me. And he looked and said, right now it is. So I'm not surprised that it's fixed now, but it's the first time I've had a chance in 15 years to really go back and look at it there. It was partially things like that that made the initial sofer say this was written as a student practice copy in one of the guilds of teaching. But yeah, the idea that these were Kabbalists, these were spiritualists, where again, you should pardon the expression, the letter of the law wasn't as important as the spirit. Probably not the way you want to say that when we're talking about scribal arts. And looking at how they write the letters. So if this is already Abraham, you guys are probably looking at Isaac and maybe into Jacob over there by your end.
Yeah, Yitzchak,
Yeah. And by those last columns where there's virtually no break. You-
After the gap is.
Yeah.
Well, this is a above, so I wonder if that's an above Torah, an above scroll where a column would be. Maybe that's what the break is.
There aren't enough of them.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
the
just
problem.
trying to.
Yeah,
I'm-
there's no obvious
There's
rhyme or
another one
reason.
there.
It's as good a theory
Another
as
break there,
any.
And that break does also have above,
Yeah.
so,
There would be.
I mean, there'd be a whole lot more.
Okay, so for example,
Well, so that gap after this is above,
right,
but that's. not
gaps
the-
like that are normal.
Yeah,
This one, what follows it is the beginning of a new portion, Va'ela Toldot. It's the beginning of that portion. Well, that's the beginning of a portion. This is not. I'm looking at it. You're in the middle of the portion there. So there's no right there. I've looked at it several times and nothing obvious has jumped out at me to try and figure it out. But like I said, there are Sofrim who have studied this so deeply that they become forensic Sofrim. They can look at your scroll and tell you its history by looking at the handwriting and the quirks of the style of the artistry.
What's the oldest known one to exist?
I don't.
Just,
The oldest known scroll of Tanakh that survives intact is actually not a Torah scroll. It's the Isaiah scroll in the Shrine of the Book
and what is that?
from the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Oh, it is.
which means it's at least from the 1st century BCE and probably older. Still written in the old styles, the ancient Hebrew form. So to me, every time we have this scroll out, there's a lot at play because of the differences in the scroll itself, because of the history of what it went through, because we know specifically that it came here in 1967 because of what it says from Westminster, and that's in their records. And we know from our records that Dan Sherry was responsible for it. And my guess is Dan took one look at the scroll from Washington Hebrew and said, it's nice, we can do better. And then he went out and did. Because that was very much how Dan approached things as a leader of this community. Yeah. I don't know what else I want to say about this one either. But,
So how come this is indented?
yeah, because
Just cause?
because so is the end of the
End of the
last one.
Okay, yeah.
Even though the letters look a little mushed together, like the person ran out of
Well,
space.
I wonder if it's one of these size gaps, but it goes between columns?
It's supposed to, and it ended up here,
Yeah, if that's what.
and it probably isn't supposed to end up there.
No, but it looks like it's
It's
one
like
of
one of
the,
these kind of a
one
gap.
of these kind of a gaps, but it somehow crossed columns.
Oh. Oh.
Doesn't it kind of look like that?
No, I can do even better than that.
Oh,
All right, Smarty.
we're ready.
Reading upside down.
So over there we had Toldot, which was the beginning of a Torah portion. That's where, within the first 8 verses of that portion, we are told that Isaac was born to Abraham and Sarah. And then he marries Rebekah, and by the end of 8 verses, he's the father of Esau and Jacob, even though we're told it's his story.
Yeah.
So he goes from being somebody's son to somebody's parent, is his story.
That's what's important about the story. according to
Toldot is a really interesting word, and it shows up in several places, most of them, not all of them, in the book of Genesis. Not coincidentally, probably, Eila Toldot Shem is what it says there at the start of that line. This is the start of the genealogy from Shem, after Noah, to Abraham. And what you have with the spacing is a consistency throughout this list of 10 generations. The end down there is, and he died, and Arpachshad, who he had just given birth to, lived so many years and had his kid, and he was gone after so many years. And then there's a space. And part of the scribal art here is that they're putting the space in after every line of every generation. So you can clearly see it. So because they were at the bottom of the page and the end of a column, they put the gap in. And I'm hoping that is correct and not just something that has happened.
It's the same 2-inch gap.
Well, that's what I'm saying, it's the same size gap.
Yeah.
Approximately the same size gap. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not. Banim uvanot. They squeezed in a nun. That nun has been squeezed in there.
Definitely.
Yeah,
looks
so
so
that
much.
gap, that gap is, you ran out
Yeah.
of space.
Because banim uvanot, banim uvanot, banim uvanot. It could have been here. This would also have been in October, maybe early November. Yeah. And again, it goes back to why a classically trained sofer would look at this and might very well decide it was never intended to be used. This was just people writing.
It
And
does
practicing.
look like, there are differences in the,
Yeah.
in
In the font.
handwriting that make it look to me like more than one person
Yeah.
worked on it.
Okay, so here,
And it's not, I mean, I'm not saying like I'm such a handwriting expert, but there are just certain things that I noticed. Like this lamed, this is a funky little lamed, and it's different than the other lameds.
so,
I don't know.
but speaking of lameds, this column is jumping out at me.
I was gonna say, there's another one where the llamas look very different
Yeah.
here too.
This entire column is jumping out at me, and this margin of this column, come on down, Yoko, is really jumping out at me. Because there is an exorbitant number of dalids,
And creases that are stretched.
hays, lameds, and ratias
That are stretched.
that are stretched out on this one, like we're supposed to be drawing our attention to it. Way more than should have been necessary,
And they all seem to be on the ends of the line.
yet, or close to it.
I don't think on that, this column also has a lot of stretched.
Yep.
On the edges.
And this one too.
But like this handwriting looks different to me from this. I don't know, it's just, maybe I'm stuck, maybe I'm looking too hard.
Well,
Oh, yeah. you
there
have
may
to-
be a reason in this column if you look at the amount of discoloration.
Yeah.
This column over the years may have been repaired multiple times and maybe taking on the character of the repair sofrim, which would probably be more stam than whatever other font was likely to have been used in the Kabbalistic world. Yeah.
Yeah, this one overall though is much more where they seem to stretch instead of just leaving gaps at the end of,
Yeah.
or gaps in the middle. Whereas some of the other ones look like, I don't know if that's stylistic or the school did have just more gaps when necessary for spacing purposes.
Yeah.
This one much more seems to stretch
This
them.
is squeezing.
I want to stretch from the
This
middle of
one
the
is-
word. In the middle of the line.
So,
Falling like that.
lest you think that, and ultimately this is what made me ask a second Sofer the question. A number of years ago, after I had been told that this was probably never intended for use, I was at Harlem for the summer. And the day I got there, Rabbi Vicky Tuckman of blessed memory ran to me saying, "I'm glad you're here." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because I need your help," which was not something that Vicky very often said. Vicky was a very competent person who liked to take charge and do things herself. I said, "What happened?" And she told me the sad story about how at the last Shabbat morning service of first session, something had happened and the Torah scroll got left out in the chapel in the woods, which if you've ever been to Harlem, the Ark
It's three.
is a tree trunk
Yes, like,
with 3 branches and a bungee cord around it so it doesn't fall out between the trunks.
but it's got no.
But it's got no
It's not
top,
clo- it's not
it's not
enclosed.
enclosed at all. I said, "How long?" She said, "Long enough that it got rained on." I said, "And you want somebody to tell you what to do with it and how bad it is?" She said, "Yep." I said, "I'll look at it. I am not a sofer. I do not play one on television, but I'll tell you what I honestly think." And I opened it up, and it was the middle of the summer, so it was in numbers. And the first thing I noticed was the really long and thick columns. And the second thing I noticed was it wasn't a Vav scroll.
It was not above, so.
And then I saw the phase.
It had those curly.
It had the curly Q phase. And I'm sitting there going, this is the sister scroll to this one. This is not the only one like it in the world. And my first thought was, maybe we got lucky. Maybe that Sofer is right, and it was never meant to be used, and the fact that it got damaged so badly and probably can't be fully fixed, maybe we'll get lucky because it was never meant to be kosher in the first place anyway. And then I thought about it for a second, and I stopped being happy, because if this wasn't a one-off, then neither one of them was a practice one, exhibiting that many similarities. And I started to get very sad, because while I was very pleased to know that this was much more valuable than we thought it was, because it's much rarer than a classic scroll, I was already beginning to mourn what, and I have no idea what was ever done with it. I don't know if they managed to get it fixed or not. Or whether it's sitting, continuing to rot someplace in a cabinet.
Or whether they gave it to somebody to fix and he said he couldn't and he
Did whatever
did
they did.
whatever disposal, kosher disposal.
But yeah, I have seen another scroll that matches this one with my own eyes. It's not a story that was told to me by a sofer. And that's what made me ask the second sofer, and that's when I learned. And when I heard what he had to say, it made sense, and it fit. Because it came from a congregation, the one at camp came from a congregation in Pennsylvania who probably thought it was their extra scroll, because the sofer they hired probably told them the same thing we were told.
So they said, oh, let's donate.
Let's give it to camp. We'll get rid of it that way, and camp will never know. Well, God had a different plan. Yep. So, here we go. So I want to roll this one back to you. Yep, because we wanted to stay over here.
Very chic, yeah.
Although we're certainly close enough, you know,
So
for
you can
rehearsal.
do it from here.
So the other thing I want you to know is, because that one wasn't rolled all the way to the end, and I made the point of pointing it out, it wasn't flopping back on itself. Let go for a second, carefully.
I mean, it's
And completely like that. This one has been rolled all the way back to Bereshit so many times and for so long and left that way that we're gonna have to hold it open for Danielle on Saturday, because it will not sit loose on this first column by
We'll
itself.
get people to volunteer.
Well, there'll be a few of you up there, so.
I don't think it'll be a problem.
I don't think it'll be a problem. The more of you I tell beforehand, the more likely we are to be able to do it. So. Here, you hold the microphone. And I am gonna walk. Yeah, this is a good chance for everybody to move back. And I can push the seats back this way as I come through. Yeah, just keep passing the microphone down so the people at home can hear me.
If there are people at home.
Dan, anybody watching this?
Sure.
Heck of a time for me to think to ask that question as we struggle to pass the microphone down. You can bring it to me because it's not going to matter. Anything on your side over mine?
You got it?
I got
And
it.
then all the stories and service.
And if you would be so kind.
This is a real source
Strap
study.
me up.
The other one, they use books.
You asked Ryan.
So here's what I think I'm going to do if it makes sense to everybody.
That might be upside down, but whatever.
It's okay. Here's what I think I want to do for the next part, which is actually dancing around and celebrating with the Torah scrolls. Because there are so many of us, I feel the need that we have to use all the Torahs in the parade.
Of course.
Everybody okay with just using the really tiny one
That's fine too.
for the parade?
Sure.
Then I'm going to leave this one open over here for the moment because we're going to read from it. The other advantage of using this one is it's the one we're not reading from.
Well, there are 7 of us, so if we each do one lap, then we get a half of.
That's right, we each do one lap, we make our 7 points.
Exactly. Although,
Do you want me to hold
honestly,
this up for you?
you got it. In fact, take it down with you if you would.
Okay, just, we're not putting on the other things.
Not yet.
Okay.
So I am going to come over here. Traditionally, we would do 7 hakafot because 7 is a good number. It's an omen of good things in the year to come. I'm going to have to do that. Darn it. All right. So, I have a number of songs I've written down here. Somebody keep track and tell me when we get to 7 hakafot, and I will stop playing because I have way more music than we need. But we begin with.
I guess I'll start since I'm holding it.
That would be great. Al shlosha divarim, al shlosha divarim, al shlosha divarim, haolam omed, al shlosha divarim, al shlosha divarim, al shlosha divarim, haolam omed, al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim, al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael chai. 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 Od Avinu chai, Od Avinu chai, Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu chai. Od Avinu chai, Od Avinu chai, Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael 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 chai. Od Avinu chai, Od Avinu chai. Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu chai. Od Avinu chai, Od Avinu chai. Od Avinu, Od Avinu, Od Avinu chai. Sisu et Yerushalayim giluva, giluva kolo havea, kolo havea. Sisu et Yerushalayim giluva. shomrim kol hayom v'kol halayla al chalotaychi David ifkadati shomrim kol hayom v'kol halayla asu et Yerushalayim tilva kol ohavea asu et Yerushalayim tilva kol ohavea. Elijah Rock, shout, shout, Elijah Rock, coming up the Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout, Elijah Rock, coming up the Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout, Elijah Rock, coming up the Lord. Elijah Rock, shout, shout, Elijah Rock, coming up the Lord. It is a tree of life to them that hold fast to it. All of its supporters are happy. It is a tree of life to them that hold fast to it. All of its supporters are happy. Shalom, 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 shalom. Shalom, shalom, it is a tree of life to them that hold fast to it. All of its supporters are happy. It is a tree of life to them that hold fast to it. All of its supporters are happy. Shalom, 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 shalom. Shalom, 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 shalom. I'm coming down to take my lap.
Yes, take it loud.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu
V'hishtachavnu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu.
One more.
Sure, for good luck.
Romemu Adonai
Eloheinu v'hishtachavnu lehar kodsho. Or not.
All righty, so come on up. No sense sitting for this. Someplace there's a yard for one of these three.
There's the one still that you put.
There's the one that I dropped.
There's one, it's in front of the. Somewhere, here's a go.
Thank you so much. Oh, come on over. It's not
You're starting over here.
right, starting over here. So here's how it's going to work. For those of you at home, you can join in and we won't even know. But we will believe you when you tell us about it later because we're that kind of people around here. So, chapter 34, 12 verses. I'm not reading all 12 of them. Starts right here in your text. We are all together going to do the blessing before and after, which means we don't repeat the Baruch Adonai line because we are absent dominion. But this way we're all doing it, so we don't need the congregation to respond. Ready? Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach. Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai, notein ha'Torah. And on top of everything else, you two are now halfway exempt from having to come to a rehearsal this week. Vayal Moshe me'arvat Moav el har Nevo, Rosh haPisga asher al penei Yericho. Moses was on top of the flatland, of the raised flatland, the steppes of Moab, on Mount Nevo, at the head of the Pisgah, that is across from Jericho. Vayarehu Adonai et kol haaretz, and God made visible to him all of the land before him. Now, imagine, if you will, if you've ever seen a map of biblical Israel, it's not portrait style and it's not north-south. It's landscape style with the Mediterranean at the bottom, with the west at the bottom. So if Moses is on the east side, his right, doesn't it sound familiar? Didn't we just do this in Torah study? The right would be north and the left would be south. So listen carefully to how Moses is seeing the land. Et Gilad ad Dan, the Gilad region up to and including Dan, as in Tel Dan, the headwaters of the Jordan. That kol Naphtali ve'et Eretz Ephraim, in the center of the country, Umenashe. That kol Eretz Yehuda ad Hayam Ha'acharon, and the entire land of Judah, further to the south, all the way across to the sea behind, which would be the Mediterranean, Ve'et HaNegev ve'et HaKikar Bik'at Yericho, and the Negev, which would be the end of the sweep from right to left, and now he's looking directly down in front of him at Bikat Yericho, Ir HaTamarim, the city of dates, right in front of him, having already seen all the way to the water beyond. Ad Soar. Vayomer Adonai Elav, God said to him, Zot ha'aretz asher nishbati l'Avraham liYitzchak u'liYaakov. This is the land that I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Lemor, saying, L'zaracha et nena, I will give it to your descendants. Heraticha be'enecha, you have seen it because I have made it known to you. V'shama lo ta'avor, but you will not go across into it. Vayamat sham Moshe, and with that Moses died there. Eved Adonai, the servant of God, be'eretz Moav, in the land of Moab, al pi Adonai, according to God's word, vayikbor oto begei ba'aretz Moab, mul beit Peor, and he buried him there in a valley in the land of Moab near Beit Peor, which happened to be where that Pinchas guy killed somebody, and more importantly, where that Balaam guy came from. Velo yada ish et kvarato ad hayom hazeh, and there is no living human being who has ever known his burial place until this very day. Otherwise, they would have turned it into a holy site and venerated it. Moshe ben mea ve'esrim shana b'meito, he was 120 years old when he died. Lo kechota eno, his eyes had not lost their seeing and their power. Lo nes lecho, he had lost not an ounce of his vigor. Vayivku v'nei Yisrael et Moshe be'arvat Moav shloshim yom, and the children of Israel mourned for Moses in the Arvat, the lowlands of Moab, for 30 days. Vayitmu yemei v'chi evel Moshe, and the days of the mourning for Moses ended. V'Hoshua ben Nun malei ruach chochma, was Joshua the son of Nun was filled with the power of wisdom. Ki samach Moshe et yadav alav, because Moses had placed his hands upon him. Might have had something to do with God ordaining him as well. Vayishmu elav b'nei Yisrael, vayasu ka'asher tziva Adonai et Moshe, and he made known to them, so they could hear it, the children of Israel, all that Moses had taught him and all that God told him. V'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe, and there did not arise in Israel another servant, another prophet like Moses. Asher yado Adonai panim el panim, one who knew God face to face. L'chol ha'otot ve'hamoftim, with all of his signs and wonders. Asher shalcho Adonai la'asot be'eretz Mitzrayim, that God had sent him to do in the land of Egypt. L'faro u'l'chol avadav u'l'chol artso u'l'chol hayad ha'chazaka u'l'chol hamorah hagadol, that he had done to Pharaoh and all of his servants and to the entire land, all with a strong hand and all with great wonders. Asher asa Moshe le'enei kol Yisrael, there was never another like him in the eyes of the people of Israel. We finish the book, we finish the 5 books. Before we say the blessing, we say, Chazak, Chazak, v'nitchazek. May we be strengthened by these words. May we give strength to each other and back to them so that they're here waiting to strengthen us again when we come back to them. And we do the blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen. Where did we put
I
this?
put it on the chair to get it out of the
That's-
way, or I passed it on.
I don't need to lift it. You were all reading over my shoulder. That way I don't have to
You
push
did it
them.
right. We
Yeah.
trust you did it right, yes.
Yeah, there were a couple of bobbles. Honestly, I didn't rehearse.
You corrected everything that was. that there were
I hope I
issues
did.
with.
If I didn't correct it in the Hebrew, I corrected it in the translation. So that's that one, and here comes this one. This is the one I really don't want to have to lift because it's all on the left hand.
Oh, we're just gonna do it here.
I'm just going to do it here. Because I've always wanted to have them both out together.
Can I move this one over a little?
Yeah, please, because then I can wrap this around. See how much it rolls up. Yeah, we're gonna have to hold it anyway. This one is much easier. We know the blessing already. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach. Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. So all those things that we were talking about that looked like errors before on this one, I'm looking at this word here going, what the heck is mush? And I realize it's kush. Because the chaf and the vav are written to
Very
look like a
close
mem.
together.
They're so close together.
I'm thinking it was deliberate that so many of these words were written in ways that you would look at them and at first glance you would see a letter other than what was there.
That was
Would be
the-
part of the
that was
spiritualist
that was the-
approach to finding new meaning in the words.
It was an active choice to write it that way.
I think it might have been. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. When God was at the very beginning of creating the heavens and the earth, v'haaretz hayta tohu vavohu, and the earth was unformed and void, v'choshech al penei tehom, and there was darkness over the face of the deep. V'ruach Elohim merachefet al penei hamayim, my favorite verse in this entire first day of creation. The Spirit of God, or a great wind, hovered over the face of the deep. It can be understood as both and either, for those of us who like to see science in the book of Genesis. Vayomer Elohim yehi or, God said, let there be light, vayhi or, and there was a big bang. Maybe. Vayar Elohim et haor, God saw the light, ki tov, it was good. Vayavdel Elohim bein haor uvein hachoshech, God separated between the light and the darkness. Vayikra Elohim leor yom, God called the light day. V'lachoshech kara laila, the darkness God called night. Vayhi erev, vayhi voker, there was evening, and then there was morning. Yom echad, one day. Not first day, one day. Matisyahu lives. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, L'chaye olam nata b'tochenu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen. There is so much in the words. And when we let ourselves just memorize the translation, it loses something. I mean, I love "in the beginning God created" as much as anybody, but that's not what it says. And the idea that there was light before there were things to make the light in the heavens, then what was that first light? And was it brought with a wind or was it brought by God? Bang! Just saying.
But it doesn't mean the day was not 24 hours. That was,
Yeah, I would be pretty okay with you saying that. So, in fact, Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Voker. Light was created, was distinguished from the darkness. God gave them both names, day and night. There was evening and there was morning. Not there was night and there was morning.
Mhm.
There was evening and then there was morning. One day. Doesn't mean that that is the end of that period of creation. It means that part of the act of creating light and darkness was there was evening to distinguish from morning, which gave us a day. How many days that went on for until we get to the next verse? Your guess is as good as mine.
because my art, I might have told you this story. I went to a young Israel for my bar mitzvah. This 12-year-old snot-nosed kid questioned, is it really in 6 days? And the rabbi said, yes, 6 24-hour days.
Yeah, no. Not me.
And that turned me off.
I can understand why that would. That's why my translation is really open to the idea that, oh, by the way, there is nothing that science has proven that is contradicted in Genesis chapter 1.
Time dilation.
You can
Just
interpret the words
our
around
day-
science.
A 24-hour day was defined when we had a rotation of an Earth around the sun.
When we recognize
When
it.
we recognized it, that's how we define a day. That's not to say that's how a
Right.
day would be defined. Before there was a sun or the Earth fully formed, that wouldn't be.
Babylonian mathematics, which may or may not have been based upon the things they were observing in the sky. It's a question. Is base 12. It's not base 7,
It's
it's not
base
base 10,
16.
it's base 12. Which is why when the rabbis come along years later and are able to calculate the calendar, all you have to do to get the Jewish calendar right is be able to divide a day into 1,080 equal portions. Naturally. Isn't that what everybody
everyone
intends to
does.
do?
My favorite interpretation, though, is that by putting the sun as just, and the moon as just markers, was the thumb in the eye of the Egyptians, who worshipped
Of
the
course.
sun.
Of course. Absolutely, and all the stars too.
Are we redressing?
So we're going to leave those right there. And we're going to go back and you can sit in anywhere in the cheap seats that you want.
I'll try to find one.
And on your way, if you would take a copy of the,
Oh.
the silver book for Yom Kippur, which conveniently has a Yizkor service in it, which seemed like a good reason to use them.
There's a little miniature yacht up there on the floor.
Oh, there's a miniature yacht on the floor?
It looks like.
No, it's something, but it's not a miniature yacht.
Oh,
We
good.
haven't figured out what it is yet. It could be.
Oh, pen.
It was probably a pen.
Yeah. Okay.
It may even be something else, because all of them come apart.
Do you have a book, hon?
I do. Where are we on time, by the way?
It is 10 minutes to 6.
Ah, so I'm running late, good. I wouldn't know what to do with myself if I was on time anyway. It just means we're keeping it relatively short. So if we open to page 540, it may look familiar because it's less than 2 weeks ago when we were doing this. And what I want to do is I want to pay respect appropriately to our own deceased loved ones that bring us here. But I really want to use that as a pretext to allowing us to end our communal formal marking of this introductory period to the year as we have come to do over the last 2 years because of what was done to our brothers and sisters in Israel and to us on October 7th 2 years ago on the secular calendar, on the day of Simchat Torah on the Jewish calendar. So this seems to be the right place to do it as we end our beginning. So on page 540, like the stars by day, our beloved dead are not seen with mortal eyes, but they shine on in the untroubled firmament of endless time. Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam, hachol v'hayam, ritru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tfilat adam, hachol v'hayam, ritru shel hamayim, berak hashamayim, tfilat adam. Following the English translation here, Eli, Eli, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. This is an hour of memory. This is our house of comfort. Wounded by loss, we retreat from life. Our synagogue gathers us in. Into this place we bring stories and prayers, unanswered questions, tears that need to be shed, lives recollected and carried within us, moments of courage and laughter and pain. This day embraces them all. This place embraces us all. Now the heart opens in sorrow, for we are time's subject, and all that we love we must lose. So let us hold fast to the love that remains and cherish the light of the sun. Today all of us walk the mourner's path. Together may we find strength. We continue on page 548. And we read responsively. At birth, a miracle, you light the spark in every human soul. Emerging into light, we breathe it in, the neshama, your sacred gift of life. And every day, every breath comes to us as a miracle. The light within us, unique and precious, is with us always while we live. When breath has ceased and life has gone, the neshama returns to you, and the spark that lived inside the ones we love, unique and precious, beautiful and good, is theirs no more. Their light is ours. Their radiance now burns in us, eternal flame of memory. So we light candles to keep our love alive, to bring their light into the world, a light unique and precious, ours to treasure while we live, a ner tamid that lights our days and gives us strength to journey through the nights. More precious was the light in your eyes than all the roses in the world. Adonai shall be your everlasting light, and your days of mourning shall be ended. Page 553. Move to the front of the line, a voice says, and suddenly there is nobody left standing between you and the world to take the first blows on their shoulders. This is the place in books where part 1 ends and part 2 begins, and there is no part 3. The slate is wiped, not clean, but like a canvas painted over in white, so that a whole new landscape must be started, bits of the old still showing underneath. Those colors sadness lends to a certain hour of evening. Now the line of light at the horizon is the hinge between earth and heaven, only visible a few moments as the sun drops its rusted padlock into place. Blessed are those who give meaning to our lives. Holy and precious is the example they leave behind. We pray, may our sorrows diminish as we recall their strength. May their wisdom protect us and help us to live. Let our grief be transformed into tenderness toward those who are still with us. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekor HaChaim. Blessed are you, Holy One, who gives and renews life. Page 556, Shir HaMalot, the Song of Ascents. Esoenai el heharim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Esoenai el heharim, me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai ose shamayim v'aretz. Together, I turn my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from the eternal maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Eternal is your guardian, your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. The Eternal will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul. The Eternal will guard your going and coming, now and forever. Page 559. In my darkness be a light to me. In my loneliness, help me to find a soul akin to my own. Give me strength to live with courage, and give me courage to draw blessing from life, even in the midst of suffering, to hold fast against the storm, to smile at a loved one's glance. Page 563. I needed to talk to my sister. Talk to her on the telephone, I mean. Just as I used to every morning, in the evening too, whenever the grandchildren said a sentence that clasped both our hearts. I called. Her phone rang 4 times. You can imagine my breath stopped. Then there was a terrible telephonic noise. A voice said, "This number is no longer in use." How wonderful, I thought. I can call again. They have not yet assigned her number to another person, despite 2 years of absence due to death. How many of us have things still saved on our answering machine that fall into the category of that poem? Everything I will remember that I was here. The ships will be the color of my clothing. The birds will use my voice for singing. The fishermen on the rock will ponder my poem. The river will follow my footprints. Page 566 at the top, we read together. At the edge of a world beyond my eyes, beautiful. I know exile is always green with hope. The river we cannot cross flows forever. Yesh kochavim she'oram magia arza. There are stars up above. so far away we only see their light, long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we've loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. On the next page, you have a piece of word art to allow us to each silently remember those we are here to remember in our hearts. The texts for traditional Yizkor on the 2 pages after that, traditionally recited silently, and then other meditations for unique circumstances that may apply as we go into our silent recitation now. And with that, we step aside from traditional Yizkor. We continue by turning, still in this book, to page 288. Avinu Shebashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Geulatenu. Avinu, you who are high above all nations, states, and peoples, Rock of Israel, the one who has saved us and preserved us in life, join with me. Bless the state of Israel, first flowering of our redemption. Be her loving shield, a shelter of lasting peace. Guide her leaders and advisors by your light of truth. Instruct them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who build and protect our holy land. Deliver them from danger. Crown their efforts with success. Grant peace to the land, lasting joy to all of her people. And let us say, Amen. And so there are words outside of our book as well. And I wanted to make the transition without fully breaking from what brings us here, by taking us back to these words, because as we stand here tonight, remembering those who died on October 7th, those who have died since, it has become impossible over the last 2 years to only look at some of the victims. On this night, we put aside chivalry, we put aside chauvinism, we put aside politics, and we remember the dead who died not in battle, but in going about their daily lives, regardless of who they are. Going back and forth across lines that divide us. And it puts a totally different slant on words that I have recently learned myself and come to appreciate and shared with others at this time. And so I wanted to get the prayer for the state of Israel out before going to the words of Henry Van Dyke. I'm standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails to the moving breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch her until at length She hangs like a speck of white cloud, just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, there, she is gone. But gone where? Gone from my sight. That is all. She is just as large in mast and hull and spar as she was when she left my side. And she is just as able to bear her load of living freight to her destined port. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at the moment when someone says, there, she is gone, there are other eyes watching her coming, other voices ready to take up the glad shout, here she comes. And that is dying. And on this night, it is also so many other things as well. Years ago, Archibald MacLeish wrote, the young soldiers do not speak. Nevertheless, they are heard in the still houses. Who has not heard them? They have a silence that speaks for them at night, and when the clock counts, they say, we are young, we have died, remember us. They say we have done what we could, but until it is finished, it is not done. They say we have given our lives, but until it is finished, no one can know what our lives gave. They say our deaths are not ours. They are yours. They will mean what you make them. They say whether our lives and our deaths are for peace and a new hope or for nothing we cannot say, it is you who must say this. They say we leave you our deaths. Give them their meaning. We were young, they say. We have died. Remember us. And the only word that I would change to apply completely to why we're here tonight is to take out the word soldiers, as we remember the ones who died not on the battlefield. Back to page 598. I invite you to rise for the recitation of El Malay as we remember both our own and those of our brothers and sisters, those of humanity. El Malay Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina Im Kedoshihim Utehorihim Kezohar Harakia Mazirim Lenishmot Yakirenu Shehalchu Leolamam Bal Harachamim Yastirehem Beseter Knafav Leolamihim Vaitzror Bitzror Hachaim Et Nishmataham Adonai Hu Nachlataham Ve'anuchu B'Shalom Al Mishkavam V'nomar Amen. Merciful God, God Most High, let there be perfect rest for the souls of our loved ones who have gone into eternity. May they find shelter in your presence among the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold them close to you forever. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May they find a home in you, and may they rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. You may be seated. I wrote these words last week, and they've changed every day since then, and I have no idea if they still make sense or if they ever did. But think of where we were 2 years ago. More important, think of where they were 2 years ago. Before the dawn of October 7th, 2023, in Israel, Shabbat morning, leading into Erev Simchat Torah later that day, just before midnight here on October 6th. Think about where we were. The end of a grand experiment to reinvigorate all of our high holy days. Slichot, Sukkot, and Simchat Torah all made stronger without weakening Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Excited for the big conclusion on Sunday, for Simchat Torah with Dan Nichols in person, after we had started on Slichot by watching the movie of his travels, learning about Sukkot. And in Israel, a country at rest, physically and spiritually, as they went to sleep on the night of October 6th. A religious community resting on Shabbat, concluding Sukkot, preparing for Simchat Torah, to dance literally in the streets in joy with the Torah. The secular community enjoying a chill weekend, many preparing and going to the Nova Music Festival to take advantage of the break on the calendar. Surprisingly little attention had been paid in Israel or here to the significant anniversary that passed just that day before. On October 6, 1973, 50 years earlier. The surprise attacks on Israel, late on the holy day of Yom Kippur, which coincided that year with the 10th day of the month of Ramadan, lulling the Israelis into a false sense of security that nothing would happen. But what happened was the start of the Yom Kippur War. This attack and the war, itself a delayed response to the preemptive Israeli strikes of 1967's Six-Day War, facilitated by calendric surprise and the successful wearing down of Israel's diplomatic position during the intervening undeclared war of attrition. The nearly fatal to Israel first 24 hours, caused significantly by failure to believe the credible intelligence available, followed by the devastating results of only 3+ weeks of fighting on both Syria and Egypt that changed the face of the Arab-Israeli conflict for both sides permanently. And to fully understand it, you need to understand that 50 years of history, but this is neither the time nor the place, because it all came to a head in 2023, 50 years later, with the pogrom of October 7th, deliberately planned to take vengeance for the embarrassment of half a century earlier. Enabled, as had been the early losses in October of 1973, by failure of Israeli leaders to take a threat seriously. Despite the historical link and the calendric similarities, Hamas operatives struck with intent to murder in massive numbers, to sow fear, and with a lack of respect or concern for their victims or for humanity. And tonight we mark the second anniversary of that tragic day and mourn the losses. More than 1,200 killed in Israel on that one day. Over 250 more taken captive, some, we pray, on their way home as early as tonight. Some hopefully somehow still alive, perhaps. Many of those 250 never to return alive. And we focus on them as we should, as we must, because as Hillel taught us first, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? But after 2 years, we also remember the other casualties. Thousands more Israeli injured. Tens of thousands displaced from their homes, many still not returned to their normal lives. Hamas generated reports of more than 70,000 Gazans killed, including civilians. We recognize the lasting psychological impact on Israeli society and on world Jewry, especially in the face of the continuing propaganda directed against not just Israel, but against all Jews worldwide. And we ask still, how different would our world be today if only a qualified world body had woken up on the morning of October 8th, 2023, calling for the arrest and trial for mass murder of Hamas military and political leaders, demanding immediate return of all hostages taken the day before. Ironically, so many more Gazans would be alive today compared to the Israeli lives that would have been saved. And I don't know of a single Israeli or a single Jew who wouldn't make that trade in a heartbeat. And yet it did not happen. And still, we too will feel the ripples, the impact here, until not only the fighting ends, but with it the propaganda war as well. The incitement to anti-Semitism we still feel. Until all the victims cease to be made to feel victimized and begin to be able to live freely again. Alden Salovey wrote just today, Rock of Israel, with hope, with anticipation that vibrates in the air and in our beings, we prepare to stop counting the days of captivity for hostages, living and dead, the minutes, the hours of waiting for their homecoming, a clench in the throat, a choke in the heart, as we wait to rejoice and to breathe once again, hallelujah. In the name of blessing, teach us, Holy One, how to keep counting with love, how to hold the exhilaration of this moment with a certain knowledge of enduring suffering, how to count so that we remember every family reunited, every family bereaved, every life renewed by joy and every life lost by one's own hand. Every simcha and every yahrzeit, every question, God of old, that you refuse to answer in heaven or on earth. Every home reclaimed, every home devastated beyond repair, every family that finds healing and every family forever torn apart. Every question, God of old, that you refuse to answer in heaven or on earth. May it be your will, God of our ancestors, God of our people, that one day we might be free to count only the moments and memories of delight and celebration. On that day, your name will be one with your people, and surely peace will reign in heaven and on earth. Hallelujah. And still we mourn so many. And still we have hope. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. And with that, our thoughts turn to our loved ones, whom death has taken from us, whether in recent days or in years past, at this season or otherwise. Our hearts open as well to the wider circles of loss in our community and wherever grief touches the human family. Zichronam livracha. May all the memories be a blessing in this new year and always. And I invite you to rise once again, page 606. For the Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, b'agala v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnasei, V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dikudsha barichu le'ela u'le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shmaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael Al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn, comfort to all who are bereaved, and let us all say, amen. Please be seated. 3 items to end, each one raising hope in its own way. First, because Sukkot is not over yet. we take the opportunity to embrace something that I was taught by my teacher, Shaul Feinberg, the very first day of rabbinical school in Jerusalem. The idea that we come out of Yom Kippur having prayed to be written in the book of life for another year, and 5 days later we're given the opportunity to lift up the lulav and wave it. And the blessing says, al netilat lulav, to lift it up, not to wave it. And Shaul taught us to think of it not as a ritual object, but as a symbolic one, like the symbol of Churchill, victory. The leaves of the myrtle and the willow making the V around the spine that we stand up with because we have been given another year, a year to do something good and positive in our world. And so the very act of reciting the blessing and waving the lulav becomes part of our hope. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat lulav. Hodu l'Adonai ki tov, ki leolam chasto. Give thanks to God, for God is good. God's mercy and love are everlasting. The second, a story from Tuesday of this past week. 50 of us gathered Monday night in the sukkah. It was beautiful. A dream come true. 50 people 5 days after Yom Kippur coming out for Sukkot, for pizza. It's not even like we were feeding them good food. To be in the sukkah together. And those of you who like pizza like I do, I apologize. 50 people. And I said to them, we're open all week. Thursday, Sisterhood will be here. Otherwise, call ahead if you want to make sure nobody's in here. And as we were leaving, Scott Heckinger looked at me and said, what are you doing for lunch tomorrow? I said, I guess you and I are having lunch in the sukkah. So we made our plans, we brought our food, and at 12 o'clock we met, and at 12:01 a car pulled into the driveway and parked. And the driver didn't get out of the car. And Scott looked and said, I don't recognize the car. I said, I don't either. He said, the driver's not getting out. I said, happens all the time. People get a text or a phone call and they pull off the road because they see our parking lot. And I'm grateful that they do. We're saving lives, literally. And we started to walk into the sukkah together. And as soon as we turned, the woman got out of the car who had driven it in, was not a member of our community, walked over to us and said, can I eat my lunch in the sukkah? Said it exactly like that. Didn't start with what's that, was sure that it was a sukkah and had brought her lunch with her. So we invited her to join us. She's not Jewish. She's a member of a evangelical church. She's been to Israel with a rabbi. Some of you may be hearing Messianic Jews in that and thinking thoughts less than positive. I didn't push because I didn't want to know. We were having too good of a time learning from each other, talking to each other, getting to know each other. She left at the end of lunch, said thank you. We welcomed her and said come back anytime. And the first thing I did after she walked away was I looked at Scott and I said, this is why we have to build a sukkah every year.
Are you aware that a woman joined us on Thursday at the Sisterhood lunch?
It may have been the same woman,
African-American woman came in.
Pat Thomas.
And she said that she had set up a sukkah in her, a table, and she had a umbrella that she hung things from.
There's hope. We're doing what has to be done. And the third, and with this we're going to end, and I saved this for last deliberately. If you don't know the story of Israel's entry in Eurovision last year, Yuval Raphael, who was the singer, was at the Nova Festival on October 7th. She survived in a room that was supposed to be safe by pretending to be dead and lying for hours among many bodies that actually were before she was rescued, not daring to make a sound lest somebody outside realize that they could effectively shoot inside and kill more Jews. She recovered from that enough to be willing and able to compete to represent Israel in Eurovision last year, the continental, we don't have an equivalent here, music festival and competition that, amongst other things, gave the world ABBA back in the 1970s. So if you want to blame it, you know where it came from. The song that was written for her to sing is a song called New Day Will Rise. I wanted to end with her story and with her performance of words that have become for the Israeli people words of hope, words of faith, words that I wish I could have found the video of, but I read the story while I was preparing today. Apparently, the woman who wrote the lyrics to the song came up with new lyrics and sang with Yuval last night in Rabin Square, which is now called Hostage Square, and brought the entire gathering to tears, as did this performance that finished second in Eurovision last year. On the strength of the popular vote while Israel was being protested. If it looks like the bat signal, it's supposed to. The Bebas children, the two babies, were big fans of Batman. That was a deliberate symbol that was pointed out after the fact. If we lived in a perfect world, the news headlines of this week would be far less ironic. But this week, the president of Austria had to announce publicly that if the rest of Europe did not stop calling for Israel to be thrown out of this year's Eurovision, which is supposed to be held in Austria, Austria would refuse to host. There are still those who get it. There are still those who support what is right and what is good. And how ironic it had to come from Austria. Amen, and thank you all for coming.